Well, thank you, Judge. Members of the Public Service Commission. My name is Daniel Friedman. I'm a councilman here in this great town of Ramapo. I want to welcome you here to Town Hall for this hearing, and I want to thank you and all those members of the public who have come here to make their voices heard for coming to Town Hall tonight and being a part of this hearing. Now, in the past, we have come to hearings of the New York State Public Service Commission to talk about, above all, money. Money that families need to power their homes, money that mothers need to provide a warm home for their young children, more money that residents and businesses will need if Orange and Rockland is going to have its way. Now, money's a vital argument because our economy has not grown, and neither should our energy bills. Our businesses have not grown, and neither should our energy bills. And our incomes have not grown, so neither should our energy bills. But tonight, something greater weighs on my conscience, weighs on our town's conscience, and should weigh on our utilities' conscience and the conscience of the Public Service Commission. It's that one thing greater than all other arguments, and that is life itself. During Hurricane Irene, overhead wires had fallen in different parts of our town, and they were regularly reported to Orange and Rockland so that they could cut the power to those wires or come and repair them and take them off the streets. Well, one downed wire, which had been reported Orange and Rockland by the Spring Valley Police, remained active and down for hours. A homeowner and his son had gone outside to inspect their house for damage, and the boy, a 5-year-old, touched a metal fence that the downed wire had fallen on. Immediately, the boy began to suffer burns, and a brave Good Samaritan who was a passerby came and grabbed the covered part of the wire and threw it away to save the child. Well, that Good Samaritan suffered electrocution, and he lay in the street while help was called. When first responders came to the scene, they couldn't even help him because they had to wait until Orange and Rockland cut the power to that downed line because it was still active, or they would risk getting electrocuted themselves. And so they waited for 10 minutes until Orange and Rockland cut the power to that downed wire, and they were finally able to reach him. Well, I wish that you could hear the story tonight from that brave hero, but he lost his life that morning there in the street. His final act, one of heroism, the likes few of which would ever dare. His name was David Reichenberg. He was 50 years old and a father of 4. He worked in a small business, and he lived with his family right here in the town of Ramapo, just a block away from where he lost his life that morning. I wish that you could hear the story from Ruvain Herbst tonight. Ruvain was the 5-year-old child that Mr. Reichenberg saved that morning from a certain death. Well, after being taken to the pediatric burn unit in Valhalla, that little boy fought his injuries for 2 weeks, and surrounded by his family, he left this world for the next. I'm using my testimony tonight to tell the stories of David Reichenberg and Ruvain Herbst because they can't. I'm telling their story because I believe that no argument can be as compelling as that of life and death. Now, in the wake of what happened to them, a debate over utility rates may seem petty, but it's obviously all connected. We're all being asked to pay more to a company that provides less in the way of service, especially given the rates that homeowners and businesses are already being forced to pay. When wires fall, this utility is nowhere to be found. And if they had been responsive, if they had at least cut the power to that downed wire, 2 deaths could have been prevented. Whenever a storm comes through, power lines remain down for hours, even days, forcing police departments like ours to spread limited resources to protect the public. Protect the public from the utilities. That's what it's come to. Now, in 2011, Orange and Rockland's parent company, Con Edison, made a net profit of $1,061 million. Con Ed made over $1 billion in 2011. And when they made in 2011, Ramapo lost a father and a child. In the last year, we were confronted with the stark reality of the complete lack of service that Orange and Rockland provides. During Hurricane Irene, we suffered tremendous tragedy. And when the October snowstorm came, it knocked out power to hundreds of thousands. Power that wasn't restored for days or even a week. Now, I myself was out of power for 5 days. And, you know, when you're out of power and you're living in the dark for so long, you learn a few lessons about living in the dark. I learned that taking a shower by candlelight is not as romantic as you might think. Now, Orange and Rockland is so ill-prepared for any power disruption that they had to hire groups from outside the state, as far as Georgia and even beyond, to come here to Ramapo to help. And in this case, Orange and Rockland is claiming they need to raise their rates to help pay for that cleanup. Pay for that cleanup? What cleanup? The cleanup that started days after it was supposed to? The cleanup that took weeks for them to finish? The cleanup that left hundreds of thousands in our area without power for days on end? Now here's the kicker. Here's the obvious point. By claiming to need more money right now to pay for the response to last year's storm, Orange and Rockland is actually freely admitting that they were never equipped to handle a storm in the first place. They were never equipped to handle a storm last year. Now, that's a basic function of a utility, is to prepare for weather. They are telling you, the Public Service Commission, they are telling you, the public, that despite the already high rates that everyone pays, they weren't able to help pay for a single cleanup. I wonder if the Public Service Commission knew about that a year ago. Now, last year was light. That October storm was the only storm we have for months. So today, they say they never had money to clean up just the one storm that we did have. So if there had been more storms over the last year, Orange and Rockland's actually telling us that they had no way to pay for them. They hadn't planned on getting ready. They weren't ready. They had no money set aside to be ready for storms which come as a natural part of the environment. Now, Con Edison, the parent company of Orange and Rockland, brought in over $13 billion in revenue in 2011. But they set aside $0 to deal with the weather. They had a net profit of over $1 billion. And you want to know what they used that money for in 2011? I want to enlighten the Public Service Commission as to what they used the money for. 4 dividends to shareholders. 4 dividends paid over the course of the year to shareholders that total $2.40 for every share of Con Edison that someone owned. You know what that totals of $2.40? It adds up. $703 million. Over $700 million spent, given cash back in the pockets of shareholders. That's where the money went. But this is actually not a new phenomenon. See, for decades, Con Edison has been bleeding its customers dry for this very reason. Now, like clockwork, every 3 months to the day, shareholders get a nice amount of cash put back in their pocket just for staying on. It's actually one of the few companies in the world that has paid a consistent dividend to its shareholders every 3 months for the longest consecutive period of time, even during the worst economic crises in modern history. Now, how long? How long are we talking about? 5 years, 10 years? Some people might say 10 years. Continuous, consistent dividends. That's a nice return for shareholders, for people who can afford to be shareholders. But no, it's actually exactly 35 years. 3 months on the dot for 35 straight years. And the last dividend was paid on March 15th, less than 2 weeks ago. Now, the first dividend was paid on March 15th, 1977. So happy anniversary to the shareholders. Now, that first dividend payment came out when Jimmy Carter began his presidency, when the price of gas was 62 cents a gallon, when the Dow Jones hadn't hit 1,000, and when a stamp was 13 cents. Now, of course, I don't remember all this. I Googled it. Of course, I don't remember 1977 at all because that was almost a decade before I was born. And that's how long shareholders profited while ratepayers suffered. Now, to get back to the October storm that we had. You know, it's great we're having this hearing tonight to give the public a chance to be heard. But what a hearing we would have had if we could have held it in those literally dark October and November days, when families were so cold they spent money they didn't have on hotels just to keep warm, when darkness seemed to be a perpetual state of life, and promises to get power back up in an hour or a day flowed from our utility like water in the Pascack. What a line of speakers we would have had. But people move on with their lives. And while they still feel anger over what took place, the regular challenges of life have returned. And tonight, 5 months later, only some people feel compelled enough to speak here. Now, for most in our town, life has moved on. But in 2 homes in Ramapo, empty chairs remind families of the permanent loss they face each day. 4 children grow older without the wisdom and support of a loving father. And 2 heartbroken parents keep the bedroom door of their child forever closed, never to see him grow up and graduate, live and love, and lead the kind of life they always hoped he would. For them, life will never be the same. For Orange and Rockland, it should never be the same. This hearing should be about holding our utility accountable, requiring them to have an emergency preparedness plan that works at a moment's notice, and a public acknowledgement and apology over their numerous shortcomings and failures. Ultimately, we're back here talking about money. But I hope that the lives lost and lessons learned will weigh most heavily on the minds and the conscience of the New York State Public Service Commission as they consider this ridiculous, audacious, insensitive, and offensive rate increase request. And if it does, I know that they will reject it as soundly and as fiercely as we all do tonight. Thank you.